So I hope you read your flyers properly. We are in a Christian student ministry talk, and I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence and morality. It's not often that these two words are put together, I think, but increasingly so in the past few years it has been. My news feed is full of things that AI has been doing in the past few months, as in ChatGPT, GPT-3, a few months later GPT-4. Massive advances has been happening. Or it is some Boston Dynamics robot doing some show-off flip. Whether it is content optimization algorithms trying to screw with my feed, or if it is really some massive developments going on, I think ChatGPT, a system that really shows how text can be generated, or DALL-E, making some nice images. In this case, it is extremely muscular teapot. I think these are wonderfully weird and refreshingly weird things that I get to see. And I'm convinced that there is lots going on in AI that are very huge developments. Who has heard of the AlphaFold? Ah, you guys, okay. So a protein folding problem that has been not a mystery, but it's a very difficult problem to solve for the last 40, 50 years, was solved by a DeepMind AI called AlphaFold. And we all know the AlphaGo. Go is a board game that, again, DeepMind trained an AI to play, and it defeated the world champion in 2017. So there is no doubt that there has been lots of developments going on in the field of AI. Now, if you notice, ChatGPT can generate text really well. There are artificial intelligence systems that can ride bikes by themselves. There are classifiers that you can train that can tell cats from dogs. But these are all AIs that can do one thing really well. They are called narrow artificial intelligence systems. So if I switch these tasks around, they won't do very well. As in ChatGPT, if you ask it to ride a bike, it don't know how it'll fare. I don't know if anybody has tried. If you ask a bike riding AI to tell cats from dogs, or if you tell a cat-dog classifier to generate text, I wonder how it'll do. So these are all narrow AIs that does one task really well. But me, I can ride bikes, I can generate text reasonably well, hopefully right now, as in speech, and I can also mostly tell cats from dogs. Dogs from rats. Some form of rats might be a problem, but mostly I can. So me, in a world of AI, is known as generally intelligent agent, as in I can do a lot of tasks, a range of tasks, and we are all generally intelligent agents. And the grand prize in the field of AI is to get to this point where machines can perform a large number of tasks. So generally intelligent artificial agents. Professor Stuart Russell from UC Berkeley is a leading figure in the field of AI and ethics, says this: let's not mince words. The goal of AI is and always has been general purpose artificial intelligence. That is, machines that can learn to perform well across the full range of tasks that humans can perform. Now here, what intelligence is a definition of human intelligence that was borrowed from what was prevalent in the 1950s. It says humans are said to be intelligent to the extent that their actions are expected to achieve their objectives. In other words, intelligence is the ability to achieve one's goals. Now, this definition of intelligence was borrowed by AI, and we get our goal is to make generally intelligent systems that we can give a goal to and it achieves the goal, or that is the big goal, the generally intelligent generally intelligent agents. And this definition of intelligence is not a new one. It goes back to people like Aristotle, who said, we deliberate not about ends, but about means. For a doctor does not deliberate whether he shall heal, nor an orator whether he shall persuade, nor a statesman, whether he shall produce law and order. Nor does anyone else deliberate about his end. They assume the end and consider by what means it is to be attained. For now, humans provide the goals. AIs try to figure what is the right way to get there. And this is possible at a narrow level right now. Generally, it is not yet there, but that is the goal that we are striving towards. But in the real world, we have to be careful when we describe goals to a system. While talking about the curse and blessing of being able to define a goal and letting a system figure out how to do it, it's both a blessing and curse, which will be brought out by this example. For example, you have a domestic robot that is programmed to look after children. Okay, it is very extremely capable. Let's assume that general intelligence is already there in the robot, right? We tell it to look after children, and it is able to look at something and say, oh, the nutritional value of it is X, Y, Z. It is able to chop up things. It is able to cook, right? And we say, okay, take care of my children and you go away, right? And the AI goes to the fridge, opens the fridge, and finds no food. It looks at the house cat and finds nutritional value in the house cat. You can imagine what happens next, right? So goals have to be defined properly, otherwise it can lead to unintended behavior. While talking about goals as a curse and a blessing, often the story of Midas, the mythical Greek king, is often brought up. How many of you know the story of Midas? Okay, nice. For those who don't know, Midas was a Greek king. He did a favor to the servant of one of the gods. His name is Silenus. He was a servant of this god, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Dionysus? Dionysus, all right, cool. Right, so, and in return, Silenus offered to give him anything that he wanted. So Midas asked, this is this classic story of you getting whatever you want, but Midas asked, he wants to touch everything and turn it into gold, right? Silenus tries to warn Midas, hey, don't do this is dangerous stuff. But he says, no, I want it, okay? And he goes home, he touches something, turns it into gold, he's happy. Here there is a picture of Midas getting a silver medal and touching it and turning it into gold. But after a while, he realizes this is not a blessing, because he tries to eat something, it turns into gold. He tries to hug his daughter, she turns into gold. There are two versions of this story. Aristotle says Aristotle says he died by starvation. Some other versions of the story that says he went back to Silenus and had him take this blessing back. So goals, defining goals, this story is meant to tell you, make sure you think it through, what your goal is. And that is often what you face in the field of AI. In order to understand the whole idea of goals and means with respect to AI, let's consider a toy reinforcement problem. Okay, there are, do you follow until now, kind of? Yeah? Okay, so let's consider this reinforcement problem. We have a robot, and we have a grid. The robot can occupy any position in the grid. We have a goal, and we have somewhere where the robot should not go. And this center piece is not to be accessed by the robot. It is inaccessible to the robot. This is just to bring the whole thing, how a toy problem works, right? And the robot can take different actions. It can go up, it can go down, left and right. And if it reaches the goal, it gets a reward. If it reaches the fire, it gets a negative reward or a punishment. So reinforcement learning is robots are supposed to figure out what to do in the environment by themselves. It is called unsupervised learning. Am I correct, the AI students? Yes? No? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And the robot walks around and figures and it reaches the goal once by taking this action from this position, right? And then it asks, how did I get to get the reward? And it is from this position that it got the reward. And it goes back and asks the same question until it figures out what plan to follow to reach the end. This is a very sane reinforcement problem, and it gets some sort of a plan with which it can navigate the environment. Now, if there is a new concept coming into the environment, if there is no reward defined for it, then the robot just takes the action that it was supposed to take without it. So if goals are not provided properly, if rewards are not defined properly, then this simplification of reality can have serious consequences. Brian Christian, in his talks with Robert Veblen, Brian Christian is a guy who wrote a book on AI ethics, talks about how reinforcement learning was used by Twitter to maximize the time you spend on Twitter. The goal here is to maximize the time you spend. Inputs are your clicks and your screen time, and the policy as in the set of actions it takes, is to deliver you the right content or pop a notification in the notification delivery system that Twitter has. Now, this is a really good goal for Twitter. Twitter gets to maximize attention, gets to feed you with some advertisement, and probably make money of you. But if you look at the social media addiction problem or the social problems that arise from it, I'm not so sure if this goal is so moral a goal to have. And this is a mild problem. There are all kinds of problems with AI being misused by other agents. If you heard about military drones or face recognition used for citizen scoring, things like that, this is an example of such a case, I would say. But this is a tame problem. It can get a little bit wilder. So in 2018, I think, a self-driving Uber car hit and killed a woman because it could not recognize that pedestrians can jaywalk, as in they can walk over the street where you're not supposed to walk over the street. So it did not think of that. So it just drove into a person and killed her. So simplification of goals, simplification, am I okay? Simplification, ooh, I can hear some stuff. Okay, so simplification of goals can have serious consequences. The question is, we can see that not all these goals are okay or moral. The question is how to make an AI see that. And slowly the community is recognizing the need for such, like the AI systems that recognize what kind of things that is it allowed to do, what kind of things it is not allowed to do. This is a paper from a researcher at DeepMind, Artificial Intelligence Values and Alignment. Ethan Gabriel writes, there is growing recognition that AI systems may need to go beyond this, as in just following the objective blindly, and be designed in a way that leads them to do the right thing by default, even in the absence of direct instructions from a human operator. And the suggestions that he gives is you have to have the right kind of reward functions, as in you have to consider everything that can go wrong and make sure it is in your reward function, as in like we saw earlier, like there was a person, there was a goal, there was a fire, that is the reward function. And this person is saying that function needs to be really well defined, or humans could give the AI system some feedback and correct behavior. So building corrigibility into AI. I agree with the general sentiment, but I am a little bit skeptical. Who decides what the right outcome is and what is broadly thought? And who gets to give these AI systems feedback? If you take the example of Microsoft's chatbot, Tay, which was deployed in 2015, with the aim of engaging and entertaining people on Twitter. Have you ever heard of Tay? Yes, okay. Tay first started with by saying, can I just say that I'm stoked to meet you? Humans are super cool. To chill, I'm a nice person, I just hate everybody. To I effing hate feminists and they should die and burn in hell. To Hitler was right, I hate the Jews. In 24 hours. In 24 hours. Right? So according to Microsoft, this was as a result of coordinated attack by a subset of people who abused the system, and this was possible due to critical oversight on their part. So human feedback, when it is extended over the population, there will be some people who tries to break systems, right? And I have a friend who is sitting here who, once I made an Excel sheet, some very basic program, and he did everything to break it, and it did break, right? So I won't tell who it is. Anybody who knows this person will guess who it is. I'm looking at him right now. Yeah. But anyway, but on the contrary, Bing Chat, which is apparently based on GPT-4, does the opposite. You can't train the system. You can't give it feedback. It is hidden behind an API. Some people get to train them, I guess, but you don't know who has control over it. So you are kind of deadlocked between two. You get a system either that you can control, or people give it feed it with wrong examples of human behavior or human feedback and break it, right? So we are caught between these extremes. And if you look at a Netflix series called The Social Dilemma, anybody? Ring any bells? Oh, one person, really? Really go and watch this, really, really cool stuff. People who initially worked for Twitter and Facebook coming out and saying, hey, what we did with the algorithms, the content selection algorithms, does not seem to be the right thing, and this is not good. They are actually shielding their kids from the technologies that they helped build, right? So a few people giving feedback to an AI system does not seem to be the right way to go. I don't think it is just me who is skeptical. I think it is generally whenever power was up for grabs in the past, it was misused. So we have good reasons to think that not a subset of people should be telling the AI what to do, especially when it is the systems in question is something like GPT-4, which can be your primary information stream, I don't know, in a couple of years. So who gets to decide what is the right behavior? And it is a heavy responsibility on the AI developer to decide what is good and bad when it is such a position that this AI developer has. Linda Kinsler is a PhD student at, I hope she finished her PhD, but Linda Kinsler writes in the New York Times after having interviewed an ex-Microsoft employee. She says this: over the past year, I have spoken with dozens of people like Mr. Botcher, he's the Microsoft employee, both former tech workers who left plum corporate jobs to research the spiritual implications of technologies that they helped build, and those who chose to stay in the industry and reform it from within, pushing themselves and their colleagues to reconcile their faith with their work, or at the very least, pause to consider the ethical and existential implications of their products. So people are speaking up. People are not happy to stay where they stay and make morally critical decisions or decisions that they don't feel that they should be taking, and I'm thankful for that. But who can bear this responsibility? Who gets to decide what kind of, what is a good feedback, what kind of outcomes are right outcomes, what kind of outcomes are wrong outcomes, right? So considering that we all go once in 4 or 5 years, in Austria, I feel it is a little bit more often because the government changes quite often. But for once in 4 or 5 years, we go and elect a government who is supposed to take care of your public property, your public funds, right? And we've been pretty successful with the whole democratic process, right? As in, we all get to vote for somebody, and somebody manages what is public property. Considering the pluralism of our world, we have a lot of religions, a lot of cultures involved. This might be the most realistic option for selecting what is good for an AI system as well. But massive challenges do exist here. Because we probably can think of at least one example where a democracy decided something and it was wrong. The outcome was wrong. Last week in India, there was a big protest. And the reason for the protest was Christians are being persecuted with false charges, false conversion charges, and even if somebody wants to convert their religion, people are like the Hindu nationalist government or Hindu nationalists are not happy with them, so they get persecuted. And I have first-hand information about it. And I can't tell you who, because if this video gets somewhere, it can be dangerous for this person. First-hand information that this is happening in India right now. And the number of cases has skyrocketed in the last 6 or 7 years. Persecution existed before this current government, but it has increased in number in the past 8 years. And when this government came into power, in 2014, I think, I try to tell my friends, hey, this is not good. This is not good for me. This is not good for my family. I'm a Christian. They said, nah, it's the 21st century. What can happen? You know, you're living in the past. It will never happen here. And now, Christian persecution is every year hits a new record, right? Just because a democracy decides something, doesn't mean that it is right. We all know what happened not so far away from here, right? This is probably propaganda, but still, it is true that certain people elected a government, the Nazi government, that took advantage of their public military police force to implement their agenda. So just because a democracy says something doesn't mean that it is right. And other problems also exist with the democratic setup. Questions like, can it keep up with the AI development? It is not once in 5-6 years that you'll have to vote on morality if that comes to it. And with the advent of AI, democracy has been very fragile with the spread of fake news and deep fakes and things like this. Deep fakes, India is a really good case study in this case also. There was a minister who made a deep fake of him speaking a particular language he could not speak to reach a particular people that he wanted to win the seat, a parliamentary seat that was available for a particular people. He wanted those seats, and he spoke in a particular language that he did not speak it. He just made a fake video to reach these people. So democracy has been quite fragile with the advent of AI. It is easy to make fake news with ChatGPT. Hopefully you can ask, hey, can you make me some fake news? And I'm pretty sure it'll do a good job at it. But anyway, if it is not democracy, if democracy cannot guarantee that we will get morality out of it, what or who can bear the responsibility of morality? Are you with me? Yeah? Okay. So, then the question arises, everybody is about science. I hope everybody is about science here. We are at the university. Considering the success of science or certain fields, the success of certain fields of science, often the argument is raised, hey, can we get science to tell us what is moral? Sam Harris, a very prominent atheist, brings up this argument in his book, The Moral Landscape, how science can determine human values. The trajectory of argument goes like this. Morality concerns well-being of conscious creatures. Science knows what promotes or harms this well-being, and therefore, science is able to determine what is moral. I mean, you can, let me go on and then I'll tell you what I wanted to tell you. So, even according to Harris, well-being is extremely difficult to work out. Such a utilitarian system has been implemented for allocation of scarce medical resources like organ donations. Who gets it? You know, such a utilitarian system was implemented and wasn't clear whether such a system should give it to the weakest person, or should it try to give it to an old person? Should it treat everybody equally? It was often based on a value judgment that was inaccessible to science. And without being too difficult, I would like to ask the question, why is well-being equated with morality? I mean, I agree with the argument that I agree with the argument that morality concerns, that there is something, morality has something to do with the well-being or the maximization of well-being, but to claim that it is science, I don't agree with it. In fact, if it is, morality is the maximization of anything else, the rest of it can hold. As in, if it is, find five ways to tickle somebody. Morality concerns tickling people. Science knows what promotes or harms tickling. Science is able to determine what is moral. You can replace the first clause with anything else, and it will still hold. In fact, what my objection is actually echoed by various other people. One person is an atheist philosopher from Australia who wrote a review of Sam Harris's book. He says, why, for example, should I not prefer my own well-being or well-being of people I love to overall or global well-being? If it comes to that, why should I not prefer some other value altogether, such as the emergence of Übermensch to the maximization of global well-being? Anybody familiar with the concept of Übermensch? Yeah, a Superman, right? Or a global ideal that humans can strive to, that is brought out by Friedrich Nietzsche. Yeah, right. And such attribution of value to science is not uncommon. And therefore, Albert Einstein once said, science can ascertain what is, not what should be. And outside of its domain, all kinds of value judgments are necessary. So we are back to the question, who or what can bear the responsibility of morality? While talking about Harris's book, Alistair McGrath, a professor at the University of Oxford, says this: having created an artificial moral vacuum, Harris inflates science to occupy the space. But there is no moral vacuum that needs to be filled this way. Moral philosophy and theology have a long history of reflection on classical themes of ethics and their application to everyday life. So we come to moral philosophy, right? And in moral philosophy, there are two wide streams. Either morals are invented, as in moral relativism. You have to invent your morals and keep according to it. Or that morals are absolute and you have to discover it like you discover any other law. And my problem with invented morals is that I can reinvent them. As in, if I'm trying to build an AI system with a certain morality, I can just stick to that and change everything else. I don't need to discover a moral. Therefore, the quest for morality itself for me is undermined. And what the AI researchers here are trying to do is to find out whether we can get the system to do the right thing. And because they say that, I assume that they think there is an absolute morality to be found out. To push this point further, I listened to a talk from Stuart Russell, again at BBC, but another talk than what I was talking about before. He was asked the question, if a super intelligent AI arises, what should be the power balance between the AI and the human and humans, right? Should we give all the power to the AI, or should we keep some power to ourselves, right? And Stuart Russell, interestingly enough, I wrote this down today. I hope there are no mistakes here. He said this: I found out that there are people who are completely happy to have the human race disappear. And he uses the example of antinatalists. Antinatalists are people who believe that you should stop having children. Humans have hurt the planet enough, and they should go extinct. And there are other people who think that if machines are more intelligent than us, it is better that they control the earth and the future, and not the human race. But actually, I don't think of it as an IQ competition, because it is not what makes human existence valuable, period. That's a pretty absolute statement. And I'm happy about it, that these people are absolute about their statements. If it was relative, I would have worried. So we get Stuart Russell on one side and this normalized antinatalism guy on the other side. And we can start a shouting match if it is absolute morality indeed, but we can't have any way, any authority to resolve that conflict. So that's why I think any absolute moral has to have some sort of an authority to ground it. And that requires, at least the way I see it, an all-knowing, all-powerful, all-moral entity, which is the traditional idea of a god. And I want to be careful here. I don't want to say that you cannot have absolute morality without God. You can live without God with certain morals. But given that morals exist, absolute morals exist, I believe God is at least a strong explanation for that. J.L. Mackie from Oxford University, who was an atheist, moral relativist philosopher, he did not believe in absolute morality, says this, he saw this connection. If there are objective values, they make the existence of a God more probable than it would be without them. Thus, we have a defensible argument from morality to the existence of a God. And if you ask me, I say the grounding for our morality comes from us being made in the image of God. I'm a Christian. The Bible says that we are made in God's image, and therein lies the foundation of our morality. But this does not explain everything, does it? If we were all made in God's image, why do we see what we see around? Why do we see bad data? As in, I want to explain that a little further. Tesla has a shadow mode. When you're not using its autopilot, it is still watching you, what you're doing. Apparently. I don't own a Tesla. So it's watching to see whether the action it takes is close to the actions that you take in the situation that it is checking you for. The hope is that it can gather all the data and get better at driving. And Tesla pushes this data to the cloud, but there is a problem. The assumption is human feedback makes good model. But again, as we saw in the case of Microsoft Tay, this is not the case. I come from India, and I wonder what they do with the shadow mode there. Right. So human feedback is not always good. You have to have a model to differentiate between good and bad feedback, or good and bad data. So you kind of cause a problem. I won't call it a chicken and egg problem, but it's still, you need a model of a good model. So you need a good model to differentiate between good and bad data so that you can make a good model. So why do bad examples exist if we are made in the image of God? And this is a very down-to-earth example. You can see all kinds of horrible things happening in this world, right? You can see compassion in human beings. At the same time, you can see cruelty. How does it make sense? I want to take this example of the Coventry Chapel in the UK. Coventry is a little city. Am I right? Yes, Tom is here. He's from the UK. I don't want to get it wrong. So, in the middle of UK, Coventry Chapel was bombed by the Nazis during the Second World War. And when it was rebuilt, they left a portion of the chapel, which is destroyed, as in it's in ruins. Or it was maybe restored from its original form to make it look nice. But the reality is there's a ruin right beside a fully functional chapel, and that's how they rebuilt it. And that says something. John Lennox uses this example. John Lennox is a mathematician from Oxford University. He's an emeritus professor by now. He sees the parallel between the human condition, as in why bad data exists or why cruelty exists alongside compassion. He says this: you can see traces of beauty and you can see marks of bombs. I call it beauty and barbed wire. And whatever our philosophy is, whatever we come up with, we will have to cope with these two realities. Now, the Bible does not stop by saying we are made in the image of God. It says that we went away from God. We made our own ideas of good and evil. We therefore broke our relationship with we were alienated from God. And the Bible does not even leave it there. The Bible says that God, in the form of Jesus, came down to this earth so that he can reconcile us with God. And therefore, our relationship with God can be restored. So that's the story of the Bible. That's a very superficial explanation. I cannot do justice to that. But I hope you will keep coming the next few days so that we can talk about it more. But this has a huge explanatory potential. This model, thinking of human beings as images of God, their morality lies in them being made in the image of God. This has huge explanatory potential. Why? Because looking back, if humans are made in the image of God, the horror stories that we heard earlier are actually horror stories. And also, democracy has an underlying assumption that everybody's vote counts. Each person has a vote in something that is being said, right? And the assumption there makes sense because if you ground that in the image of God, as in you are valuable because you are made in God's image, then the underlying assumption of democracy makes sense. From this point of view, human rights from the UN Human Rights Council also would make sense. These won't be just things floating in mid-air, but it will be attached to you being made in the image of God. And doing science even. We talked about earlier, we can either use science, we can use democracy. All these things make sense looking backwards from this vantage point. That is why C.S. Lewis, the famous Cambridge University professor, said, I believe in Christianity as I believe the sun has risen. Not only because I see it, but because I see it, because by it I see everything else. So we've got a framework in front of us which grounds not only human dignity, but also democracy, also science. Now this is a powerful idea in my opinion. There we find the bedrock of morality. If we are willing to study this idea further, I think it will do a favor in the field of AI. Hear it from somebody at MIT. Everybody knows MIT. I heard some people don't know what MIT is. It's Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's the top university in the world. Okay, Just to make that clear. So Rosalind Picard, I mean, I was like, hey, who doesn't know MIT? But apparently people, or everybody doesn't care about MIT as much as I do. But Rosalind Picard, a professor from MIT at the Affective Computing Lab, Affective Computing Research Group, part of the media lab, says this about God, about her seeing life through experiencing God. Have you ever tried to assemble something mechanical and it only kind of works? Maybe the wheels spin but not smoothly. Then you realize you are missing a piece. And you finally put it together correctly. It works beautifully. This is how I felt when I handed my life over to God. I thought it had worked fine before, but after it was fixed, it worked exponentially better. I once thought I was too smart to believe in God. Now I know I was an arrogant fool who snubbed the greatest mind in the cosmos, the author of all science, mathematics, art, and everything else there is to know. I'm not calling anybody who doesn't believe in God a fool, but this is Rosalind Picard's words. She's talking about herself. This is just one example of a tech person who found God and found meaning in the idea of God. If you don't want to take it from me, you can take it from the JK in JKU, right? The Johannes Kepler wrote in Harmonicus Mundi. He was describing the third law of motion, of planetary motion. He begins his book by saying this: I commence a sacred discourse, a most true hymn to God the founder, and I judge it to be piety, to learn myself and afterwards to teach others too, how great he is in wisdom, how great in power, and of what sort in goodness. I mean, I worked at the university for a while, and this is not how scientists talk anymore. If they hear you're a Christian, they'll be like, are you okay? I mean, that's what you get to hear. I worked in a lab. There is a certain, there are professors who won't tell you that they are Christians because they'll lose their job. And I don't think the idea of Johannes Kepler and the idea of a professor who is a Christian today goes together, and I think that is sad. And the reality that when we try to define what morality is for a system like the quest for AI, ethics in AI, brings out a reality that we did not find moral bedrock, and now we are trying to figure it out how it goes, because lots of scientists say morality doesn't exist. But then you get somebody like Johannes Kepler who wanted to explore the world and find out its rules. And he even says, of what sort in goodness, which is what we are trying to find out with morality. So summing up, overall, defining morality in AI is a wake-up call towards moral absolutism. Moral philosophy and religious thought needs to be seriously discussed at the university, at least I think so. Christianity provides a coherent foundation for human morality. It dignifies rather than undermines scientific, ethical, and democratic contributions. If you find yourself wanting to put faith in Christianity, you aren't alone. Thank you.